Start streaming, so we can get going. We'll wait for Mark to give us the thumbs up.
We have 8.
There's 7. He's not on the
I know,
committee.
yeah,
He thought he
apparently I
was.
expired unknowingly.
But we're encouraging him to reapply.
Oh, perfect.
We can vote you back in, I think.
Okay.
Getting those email distribution lists of everybody changing off boards is probably.
And yes.
Mhm.
Glad to see you.
All right.
No. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, louder than I thought. Sorry.
I do it twice.
With the gavel.
I will now call to order the City of Sherwood Budget Committee meeting for February 27, 2025. David, will you please conduct the roll call?
Chair Strode,
Here,
Vice Chair Painter is absent. Fairbanks is absent. Thomas Sherwood.
Here.
Nancy Taylor. Tim Rosner.
Me.
Kim Young. Renee Browse is absent. Taylor Giles is absent. Keith Mays.
Here.
Doug Scott is absent. Dan Stankey. Here.
all right, the next item on our agenda is approving budget committee minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the City Budget Committee meeting minutes for December 5th, 2024?
And then.
Okay,
So on page 8 of the packet, it's just one scrivener. It has Counselor Lana Painter instead of Vice Chair Lana Painter.
Yeah.
So
And I got a promotion.
the
so can we get a motion to approve the minutes as amended for the Budget Committee minutes for December 5th?
I'm going to.
approve as amended.
Approve as amended.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion passes. Tonight's meeting will be a working session only, so there will be no general public comment at this meeting. Now we'll move on to new business. I will turn it over to the city manager, Craig Sheldon.
Thank you, Katie. I'll be real quick. Just welcome everybody. And as we said last time when we had the budget meeting, the budget looks good as we move through it. Tonight, you'll see that. I just want everybody to remember that these are the end of December numbers when we put them together, and David will talk a little bit more about that. But that's where we're at the end of December. And as we get into the URA, I'll talk a little bit more about the projects because we'll be spending money out of the URA soon on some other projects. So I'll turn it over to David.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with a financial update, and the first fund in your packet all in front of you is the general fund. And I took into consideration some of the feedback we received from the last budget committee meeting. And I'm hoping that Mayor Rosner, this is kind of what you were looking for, where the last meeting, we just showed actuals for the prior fiscal year for the first, I think it was for the first to the end of November. And now I actually put the adopted budget in there. So we can kind of do a comparison. And to the far right, it just shows how much we've collected in the 23-24 budget versus the adopted, as well as the 24-25 budget. So in the general fund, everything is looking good. Our operating revenues are at almost 63% of our adopted budget. Property taxes, we've collected so far 92% of our budget. You're always going to have a little bit of uncollectability rate. I know last year we had 96% collection rate at this time at the end of December, but some things change where some folks, they take advantage of the discount. Some might pay a third. So watching that, but I always factor in when I do budget the property taxes, at least a 2 or 3% uncollectability rate that we'll collect in the future. Fines and forfeitures is something I'm really watching. I know I spoke about this last committee meeting in December. Right now, we're only at 33%, but if you can recall from the last meeting, the rest of our camera systems came online in November. We did have a little upgrade that occurred that caused some fuzzy imaging, so there were some tickets that we could not, that basically had to be dismissed. So really watching that, we do have room and flexibility. If I need to lower that fines and forfeitures amount, we do have the flexibility to do that in our budget. So it's not going to cause us to have to cut any expenditure line.
We also don't have that right turn camera anymore, which is a good thing,
Yes,
but that's gonna impact revenue.
yes, you are correct. Charges for services, this is really all dependent. It's really all dependent on what's going on. Mainly in the building fund is where you see a lot of the building permit funds. You see a lot of the charges for services. So it's really development driven. Intergovernmental, I spoke about this. We're at 50, almost 52% collection. These are just payments really from the state of Oregon, all of our state shared revenues. Everything's coming in line with what we thought. Franchise fees, again, a little bit low, but it looks like we're collecting a lower rate, but you know, for some of the PG, the Northwest Natural, they pay us one time a year. So those payments usually come. It usually comes in January, February. I did receive the notice from Northwest Natural that's coming in this month. Interest earnings, nothing concerning there. I mean, we did budget 248,000. It's really just timing. You know, all of our property tax revenues, they come in November. So now we're going to start seeing that interest revenue really build up quicker. Miscellaneous revenue, that can consist of the opioid money, and a few other little miscellaneous, whether it's sale of publications, fingerprinting that the PD does. Transfer in this money is, it's from various sources, but it's mainly from the transient lodging tax. And when I'll get to that fund here in a little bit, but we're kind of waiting to see how things shook out with that. I don't want to say it was a lawsuit, but Washington County had to collect some past due transit lodging tax on the hotel. There's some change in management there. They got a little bit behind. And when we get to the transit lodging tax fund, you could see we went from $25,000 at this point last fiscal year to almost $98,000 this year. So some of that money pertains to prior fiscal year collections that we should have received. And as for expenditures, I'm happy to report salaries and wages. We're just about at 44%. There have been some open positions, some changing of positions. Some of it's project driven, whether, you know, how folks are allocated out between different funds. They might be spending more of their time right now in some of the other, whether it's the water fund, the sanitary fund, storm fund. So nothing of concern there, either for materials and services. Transfer out, that really deals with the transient lodging tax. Not the transient lodging tax, but by us transferring the money in from the transient lodging tax, it thus frees up unrestricted revenue that goes towards the fund public art, to fund economic development and promotion funds. Any questions before I move on? All right, the Public Art Fund. We have one project that's in the works right now. That's the roundabout art. To date, we spent $65,000 on that. The adopted budget still looks low, but if you can recall, I believe it was the end of January, 1st of February is when I brought that supplemental budget. So we're looking at a point in time as of December 31st. So that amount has been increased to cover the expenditure for the roundabout art. Interest revenue is still outperforming expectations, which is not a bad thing. But inflation is starting to creep up. So that's one thing that's going to be factored into our budget in the upcoming biennium budget cycle. Economic development and promotion. In terms of interest revenue, like I said, is outperforming expectations. I'll be transferring the money into that fund from the general fund here in the next month. Salaries and wages, I know that looked low last time we met. That was just because the former employee was booking all the money in the city manager's budget there, making it a little high. So I made that adjusting journal entry and moved that around. Materials and services, this kind of deals with some, whether it's promotional activities, some of the events that Eric, our new economic development manager, is going to, just to promote the city. encourage development here in the city. So he's doing a great job. Again, nothing in terms where our total expenditures are 40% of budget right now. So everything's looking great in that fund. The next fund is the transient lodging tax fund. And as you can see, that second column, last year at this point, December 31st, we had collected $26,000. This year, we're at $98,000. And some of that difference is because the hotel owed us some money. So, which will be good because I'll have to bring another supplemental budget, thus transferring more money over to the general fund and thus freeing up more funds for the economic development and promotion fund and the public art fund. Yes, Nancy.
Also where the Airbnb money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything that pertain, yeah. So Airbnb, I'm trying to think of those other platforms. Yep.
Question, the adopted budget of 150,000, was that, are we not collecting as much as we thought? Or I noticed we had the same adopted budget in the previous year, or is that just
Well,
just a
this was really uncertainty when I was preparing the budget last fiscal year, knowing that we're behind on collections and working with the county. It was hard for me to gauge. And so I took our conservative route and estimated that revenue. But like I said, I'm going to have to bolster that up because I want to get that money transferred out to the general fund and get some more dollars in for public art and economic development and promotion. All right, our grant fund. This or the intergovernmental revenues, it's the money from Metro for our community enhancement grant program. Materials and services is made up of all the grants that the committee approved and then ultimately the budget committee and city council approved through the budget process. To date, so far we spent 141,000 out of the 203,000. There are some city projects mixed in there that are in the works that I've seen. So that we will reach that $203,000 mark before the end of the year.
And just to put a plug in, that process is open right now. Applications are due April 15th.
Yes.
Be reviewed early June. So nonprofits, get your applications in.
Yes.
For all
Yes.
watching in TV land.
Yes. Please get your applications in. As Kim Young said that April 15th, and we will be holding that committee meeting, a work session 6 p.m. on the first meeting. I think it's June 3rd or June 4th.
Said June 3rd, so
Yeah.
you're right.
Is that on a reimbursement basis or is it, we just get the money up front?
No, it's not or we give the money up front. Yes.
Okay.
David,
Yeah.
for the intergovernmental, that's the money from Metro, you were saying?
Yes.
And
They pay us on a quarterly basis. And so, but sorry,
no,
ask
you're
your
in.
question. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that's the 1 quarter payment. And then I just received an email with another quarterly payment that's coming through. So, it's all about timing. So the Community Investment Fund, this fund, as we talked about and as approved through the budget process, there were some interfund loans that were approved through the budget process. We just actually, when we get the broadband, we did do an interfund loan for $2.4 million for broadband. We're about ready to do that $600,000 interfund loan to the sanitary fund for the Schaumburg project. You can see interest is at 204%. It was just the timing on when these funds would need that money. So that money is set in the community investment fund longer than I initially thought. Thus, interest collections are a lot higher. And through the supplemental budget process, it was determined instead of touching principal, let's use some of those interest earnings to help to transfer over to the police department to help them. They have some retirements coming up and
Cycle plan.
career cycle planning. Yes, thank you. To help fund, I don't want to say over hire because there's some key positions that are retiring, which they need to backfill those lower level positions so they can hopefully bring folks up within. So I think we have 3 officers retiring this current calendar year. So
Yeah, and for those listening, it takes almost a year to train a new officer. So
Yep.
we hire ahead of time, so when our officers retire, we have someone that's close to being fully trained, ready to go.
Yeah, we just brought on 2 new officers. They just were introduced to senior leadership on Monday was their first day.
Yes,
they-
yesterday.
Yeah.
Reserve.
We came from our reserve program, which is a great program. Yeah.
Mine as well.
Horrible. It's working how intended.
And I think in April, they go to the academy and they're there for some time. So we won't see them on the road for a while, as the mayor was saying.
They get back from my academy in August.
All right, street operations fund, everything is looking good in this fund. Charges for services, we're at 51%. Intergovernmental, all about timing here again. This is all the state shared revenue, gas tax. We get money for vehicle registration through the county. So we receive that stuff on a quarterly basis. So when you look at that second quarter in the fiscal year, we don't receive those funds until January. So, but nothing out of concern. Expenditures are looking great, only at 36%. Transfer out will be conducting those transfers. That money gets transferred over to the street capital fund. So that's just a little internal journal entry that we have to do to move that money from the street operations to the street capital fund. Next is the street capital fund. Revenues are looking great. We're at 66% of the adopted budget for collections. Infrastructure development is high. There's a few payments in lieu that we received from developers. Interest revenues looking great. Again, like I said, the transfers in, I'll conduct that journal entry here in March with my staff. Expenditures, they're looking a little low right now, but it's all about timing when it comes to street capital, where a lot of those projects occur during the spring, summer months. And then the transfer out there, that's money that gets transferred over to the general construction fund to help fund the Cedar Creek Trail projects that we've been working on. The general construction fund, charges for services are looking great. That is money that I think that comes from the field house. Is that correct, Kristen? Or it's the fees. Yeah, yeah, it's for the rentals, and that money we're recording it in the general construction because eventually we're gonna have to replace that turf field. And so right now, I think that pot of money is sitting about $600,000 in this fund. So we'll have the money available to us when we go to replace that turf here. And I think in the next few years is when it's slated to be replaced.
David, how much is the turf field?
A lot.
Like million?
So,
Yes?
yeah, last time we did it, if there's no damage to the actual drainage system underneath, you're looking 4 to 450, somewhere in there. Baseball fields, probably 100, but this, the infield's probably around 110 to 120,000. And that's not really counting the inflation on them. So it's the drainage that really costs the money. If something's messed up with the drainage.
Field house is inside.
Field house is probably, the turf in the field house is probably about 60 or 70,000. We changed that out.
Isn't that constantly being rented?
It actually stays pretty busy
Yeah.
during.
Yeah, it depends. It's utilized 4 hours a day and 4 days a year.
We have some limitations on that because of parking with the public works being in that location
Right,
too.
you
So,
can park and walk over.
right, they do, but I mean, they can't start any early until public works is. off
Oh.
work. So,
But it's still, it's a nice facility. It seems to. Be in demand.
We'll definitely have to replace it before we look at moving that.
so I think the last time that turf field was replaced was probably around just before COVID.
I don't know how long your turf. field
About 10 to
lasts.
12 years for that field.
Okay,
Halfway.
I just hate to replace it in the next year.
Yeah, no,
So.
it's in good condition.
And the Public Works Department, they do a great job too. I know, I think with the turf field replacement, the outdoor, we had those years of COVID where really wasn't being utilized much. So I think it kind of extended the life of that field a little bit by a few years. Salaries and wages, expenditures, all looking great. That capital outlay there will, when we get to the last slide in my presentation, is about the projects. Really Cedar Creek Trail is what's being expensed out of there. Next fund is water operations. If you can recall from that first meeting, you might look at charges for services, kind of adopt the budget from one fiscal year to the next, being a little lower. That's just because we're transferring more money over to the capital side, because our fund balance in the water operations was getting a little high than what some of our accounting standards like to see. So we do have a lot of water capital projects coming up in the future. So we need to make sure that capital fund stays healthy.
Question, David. For future, it'd be great to see like transfers in, transfers out, as opposed to just seeing the net number. So we can kind of understand that. Does that make sense? Or am I missing something?
Because the operations capital are budgeted in the same fund, under accounting, I could probably show it away, but you can't do a transfer out and transfer out in and out of the same fund.
Stated differently, the goal being to understand better what I don't think our charges for services are down 50% in that quarter, right? So what is our actual revenue coming in versus understanding that some's getting transferred out?
Yes, and when I get to the next slide, you'll see almost 1.9 million of the charges for services being recorded in. So when you look at it together, we have about 3.6 million over 6.2 million. So we're a little over 50% collections, but yeah, I'll figure out a way to show it better. So it's a little more clear.
And someone not knowing that out in the
Yeah.
ether, reading that going, what world's going on at Sherwood?
No,
Yeah.
that you are correct. As for expenditures in the water operations fund, everything is looking great. Again, you might look at, salaries, they're at 40%, but a lot of the public works folks, they're allocated out on the various funds. So it really depends on what projects. So there's nothing out of concern right now. Materials and services look great. Debt service, these are just semi-annual payments. We make them in December and then we make them again in June. So we're at 46%, right on line with basically last year. Our water capital fund, there's the other amount of the charges for services that the mayor and I were just talking about. Half of that amount's been recorded over in the water capital to, I know there's some big projects, Public Works, I think it's about 10 years time or early 2030s. There's gonna be another huge water capital project going on. The big expansion that just occurred, that ended last fiscal year. That's why you do see the capital outlay numbers a lot lower. Last year, we had adopted almost $8 million. That was us finishing up that expansion project down there in Wilsonville on the Willamette River. And so this year, there's only been $1.2 million budgeted for capital outlay, but nothing's been started so far. But you'll see a lot of the activity when it comes to capital related projects are occurring in the URA, which we'll get to in our second meeting.
David?
Yeah.
With last year, with there being almost 8 million budgeted and only 500,000 actual for that,
What was that? Sorry.
for the 2023, in this first section for the capital outlay, almost 8 million was budgeted.
Yep.
But then the actual only ended up being, that's for this time of the year, right?
Yeah, that's for this for 6 months. And basically, the city of Wilsonville oversaw and ran that project, and they would just bill us on a quarterly basis. And we spent the full amount that we were planning on spending. So. Sanitary operations. This is one where we're not splitting charges for services. We've talked about it before. The sanitary fund is a fund that has had some struggles with, revenue generation or generating revenue. And that's something that we've talked about that we need to focus on of how could we make this fund healthy. We're going through our SDC methodology update. And so that eventually will be coming in front of city council. Now that we've had some of our bigger sanitary projects, us understanding the cost for the Brookman Sanitary Project that we're working with Clean Water Services on. We just kind of understood the totality of those costs, so now we can actually finish that SDC methodology update.
Yeah, and we're actively pursuing state funding for our portion of that project, which I think is around $4 million.
Yeah,
What would that be out of the operations instead of the capital? Is that a capital project?
oh, yeah, no, I was just talking about the sanitary fund and
Okay.
in kind of in general, because when you look at operations capital, they're all budgeted under the sanitary fund. They're just different line items in the sanitary fund. But the charges for services, they relate to the operations. Salaries, wages, materials and services, everything is looking great there in the sanitary ops fund. Sanitary capital, as I just already said, there's no charges for services. We're not moving any money from the operations to the capital side. Intergovernmental, you could see last year we had about $3 million budgeted. This year, $75,000. We finally, I believe the Rock Creek Sanitary, that IGA is either has gone in front of city council or is going in front of city council this upcoming month. And so it was just a timing of understanding when that project was going to occur. And I believe Clean Water Services is covering most of those costs, or 100. It's a reimbursement, yeah. So it's really just engineering costs. Infrastructure development, there is a payment in lieu that we received from a developer. That's why that's a lot higher than what was originally budgeted. The loan proceeds, I spoke about that in the community development fund. That $600,000 is just an interfund loan. The Schaumburg project will be starting here shortly, so you'll see actually that interfund loan actually occur here soon. And it's all about timing when it comes to these sanitary, whether it's water, storm, sanitary projects. Haven't really started many projects. That's why the salaries and materials and services, all those costs are very low right now. We've only spent 1.1% of our adopted budget, but that'll pick up here soon.
Mainly that's for the Brookwood Sanitary and the Rock Creek kicking off. So.
Yeah. All right, stormwater operations. This is one fund which the mayor spoke about. It's same as a water fund. I'll look at it away because we are transferring over some of those charges for services. We kind of split the way we were budgeting those dollars, almost half in the operations fund and almost half in the capital fund, just to set that money aside for future capital projects that we might have for stormwater capital. So everything is looking in line. We've collected 53% of our charges for services. Again, the fines, interest and other, that's just a category we use kind of across all the various funds. It's interest revenue there. Interests are outperforming expectations. It's not a bad problem to have, but then that means, you know, cost of borrowing can be higher. Inflation is higher. So at least we're bringing in some dollars to kind of offset that. Salaries and wages, materials and services, like I said, these are a lot where all the public works positions, they're all allocated across all the various funds. And so just kind of depending on what they're working on at the moment. Stormwater capital, as I just previously spoke, we're reporting some of that revenue. We're about 49%. It wasn't quite 50-50 how we split up the charges for services like we did the water fund, but it was close to in the stormwater capital. Infrastructure development fees, again, there was a payment in lieu in there. That means there's development occurring here in the city, which is great. We're at 678% of adopted budget, but it really just kind of depends on, it's really hard to predict on when those developers are going to pay their fees and when they're going to decide to move forward with their projects. Salaries and wages, we're only 2.6%, but a lot of that just depends on when those projects will start. So we're getting into the nice spring weather. I imagine there's going to be a lot of, there'll be more expenditures coming up here soon as those projects get started. All right, the broadband fund, charges for services. Again, I know I spoke about this in the December meeting. Brad, Brad Crawford, he's our broadband IT director. Very happy with, the way the broadband new customer signups ahead of what the original projections were. Everything's kind of fallen in line in terms of what he expected in terms of operating revenue. The loan proceeds of $2.4 million, I took that resolution in front of council at the beginning of December. That was just an interfund loan from the Community Investment Fund. Salaries and wages, everything is looking great there. I mean, the broadband fund has spent 46 to 47% of their adopted budget. So everything is looking great there. And you might look at capital outlay, say, no, it's a little bit higher. There's gonna be a supplemental budget I'm gonna bring in front of city council. Last year, there's $1.6 million in there, but there was a project with Wilsonville, King City. That's where all that intergovernmental revenue came from, of that $1.5 million.
That was ARPA handouts.
Yeah, from the state,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was nice, though that handout it actually ended up being state money because the state took the standard deduction, and so we didn't have to follow the federal grant laws, and report that on our, schedule of federal awards.
Well, the truth is they camped on the ARPA money till the last minute,
Yeah.
hoping the feds would change the program, and then they had to rush it out the door.
Yep.
So they gave it to all the House reps, and senators to give away. So we got that.
All right, project update.
Hey, David. I have a
Oh,
quick
yes, sorry.
For this broadband, this $2.4 million loan, that's from the Community Investment
Yes.
Fund. When those payments are paid back to that fund, where are those recorded?
They will be recorded under, debt service.
So there'll be a new line item?
Yeah, they'll be budgeted next year because this loan occurred in December. So next year, we're gonna factor that into the broadband budget. And then in the community investment side, they're gonna have interest earnings because broadband's gonna have to pay interest on the loan, so.
Okay.
Project update, I kind of formulated this slide a little bit differently because I know last time was a little confusing because some of these projects go over multiple years. It kind of looked like we weren't doing much work, but well, it kind of depends on what year these expenditures, what fiscal year they kind of fell into. A lot of the grind and overlay, as the city manager Craig talked about the last meeting, and the Meineke roundabout, the repaving there, those occurred during the summer months. Those projects are 100% complete. The Cedar Creek Trail, some things are starting there. That's about 1%, but that's going to be year over year long project. The Murdoch Master Plan, that was been completed. And the citywide catch basin remediation program, that's a yearly expense. You'd see it in our capital improvement plan, $60,000 each year. So we spent about 10,000 of the budgeted 60,000 that was budgeted for this current fiscal year. But the total estimated cost over the 5 years or the multiple years is 430,000.
Well, I love the fact that with the exception of one, all the completed projects were under budget.
Gonna say that we estimate well and get under budget.
So the citywide catch basin, that'll be closer to 60,000. We got spring projects going on. So we'll be replacing catch basins then. So that'll come up with 60.
And that 24 million for Cedar Creek crossing at Cedar Creek, that we know that's a bad number. Because we really haven't done the work to understand the cost of that.
Yeah, I just pulled these numbers off our.
It's a placeholder until we do the engineering.
Exactly.
Question on that though, is everything like funded? Like, is there the funds there?
No,
No.
that's what's misleading because the Cedar Creek Bridge it's in our CIP, but it's in our transportation plan. But we still have a lot of work, just like the other bridge, to build a layer cake of funding to do that. But the expenditures you're seeing in there now are some of that initial, like the floodplain work, some of the initial design work, so we can get grant eligible, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that those dollars, the 300,000, that is funded. It's just the 24 million.
Yeah.
or whatever.
Whatever the actual number is.
Yeah.
When we get farther along.
That's just a think.
Yeah, we think it, and as the mayor was saying, a lot of this stuff, you have to get these projects shovel ready, I guess I should say, or you got to do a lot of planning and then you can go after those, whether it's grant dollars, federal dollars, yeah, you kind of have to spend money in order to try to get money, so. And now that kind of ends the presentation for the city. Everything is looking great. There was no 5-year forecast update because nothing has really changed from the last forecast. The one thing I'm really watching is really the general fund, and it's really the fines and forfeitures. But as I've said, we do have flexibility to offset those without having to make any cut from anyone's budget.
And.
Yes.
And inflation.
Yes.
What?
Yeah, no, inflation is going to be one of those key factors that I'm really going to be watching in the biennium budget because inflation is starting to tick back up, unfortunately, with the potentially tariff trade wars, just everything is going on back east. So that's really something I'm going to take in consultation with the city manager, we're going to be consistent with our conservative approach.
There, can I add a few things, just as
Yeah.
as we're all thinking, because we're going to be going into the budget process, and Craig's gonna present a budget to us, and it's a 2-year budget this time around. Just a heads up on some potential headwinds we're facing. WCCLS is going through the process of trying to figure out what the next levy rate's gonna be. They want to go in November to get the levy passed.
Which is library. So
I'm sorry, which is library. So yeah, Washington County, Cooperative Library Service. So what about 70% of our, 80% of our library budget comes from that levy. Washington County, and then there's a general fund component that comes from the Washington County budget. The reason I'm bringing it up is the early signs we're seeing is they want to raise the levy rate 10 cents, which is about almost a 50% increase. But on top of that, they want to set minimum service hours, which is code for we're only going to fund you for 45 hours of operation a week, which is we're at 60 right now. And on top of that, they want to centralize collections, which is another potential 1.5 FTE. So I don't want to be doom and gloom, but when we're thinking about that second year, we could be looking at some significant impacts. Personally, I don't know how you pass a levy when you're telling the public that
More
you're going to
money, so we
reduce
can give you less
services.
services.
Yeah, and their answer to that is, well, you guys can be open 60 hours and just pay for it yourself. So, but that could be $200,000, that can be $400,000. So that could be a significant hit. And then there's some other minor things like we're gonna have to take over a park, which Craig can give you details on, which is probably about 50,000-60,000 a year, I think is what you talked about, Craig. So we have some yeah, Linger Parkway.
I mean, we already own the park,
We
but the
already own it.
HOA's been maintaining it.
Yeah, so that's,
It's over a 2-year period.
yeah.
Is it the itty bitty one?
No.
It's the
big giant one all down Century Park, yeah.
Yeah, the agreement with the HOA is
Yeah.
running out, so we'll have to take it over.
They have
So,
an itty bitty park, and then they have a green.
yeah, but I'm just food for thought. We're gonna have some budget headwinds I'm worried about when we go into this next budget cycle.
Yeah.
So,
And I do think it's time to think about it. It's a good.
Yeah. and for anyone watching, I wanted them to hear that so they can go talk to their county commissioners.
Or the mayor.
Well, it's the
I'll go
county.
talk to them with them.
Are there any other concerns about grants or funds that we've already been awarded that are being frozen or?
There's we are getting, it's crickets at the federal level on any specific questions around grants. The earmarks we've gotten are through appropriations, so it's gonna be pretty tough to stop those. I'm not as worried about those. And no, that's the money for Ice Age Drive and the broadband. 1.1 million we got for broadband. The EPA grant, Meals on Wheels, which could impact our senior center. There are some other funding areas that are just up in the air. And you know, it's craziness back there when I have staff at senator's office reaching out to me to see if I've heard anything. So,
Remember, everybody
Yeah.
watches what's called the news.
well, it's,
Yeah,
we're all asking questions of those federal agencies
Right.
and it's crickets right now. Yeah, so we'll see. So to answer your question, I think it's gonna be another 5 to 6 months before we get like clarity and
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
I do worry about that as we put together our budget though, because there's a lot of uncertainty there. I mean, even with this being a natural or national bird wildlife sanctuary and some of the parks and different things that are not being funded, part of me thinks,
But with the exception, I can't think of anything from a capital, I think most of our risk is on the capital side, like the EPA funding.
Yeah.
Which would just delay those projects. From an operational side, I'm not worried about property taxes and all that. The Meals on Wheels and some of those things might be an impact. So,
so we'd
Yeah.
have to come up with with funds for that if we wanted to continue, right?
sure, but it's not, the vast majority of our funding is not tied to federal funding, I guess my point. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I,
It was
They-
120 before, it went down to 110, so expected.
the pattern we're seeing in DC, what I'm hearing from NLC is, and this just happened with, there was a public health facility and I can't remember where it was in Oregon that was about to shut down because they lost their
Wasn't it
funding.
Coos Bay or something?
I think it was Coos Bay. And they complained to the agency and all of a sudden it was reinstated. And we're seeing that pattern a lot is if our federal like Widener stuff goes and yells at them, they go, oh yeah, that was a mistake. And they fix it. So I think that's gonna work for some areas. It may not work for all areas. So broadband money, they haven't appointed the new director of NTIA, so it's probably gonna be summer before we have clarity on that. That's like the BDP money, the $9 million grant we just got.
So, Tim and Dave, about how much are we looking at risk?
I don't think we have a clear number. I was just giving examples and just to kind of, for everyone, just be prepared. There might be some tougher conversations. That's all. Yeah.
When things change, just have to notice it and pay attention and
Yeah.
adjust. That's why you have supplemental budgets and
And again,
one
not as,
positive and the negative things happen throughout the year.
not as much on our operational.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna add.
Right. Widening.
They're gonna do their best and Selena's is doing a great job
Yeah.
too. But I didn't want to end on a negative. Craig, do you have your list that you shared with me the other day? Could you talk about that? Or
Didn't prep them.
I should have, the monies that we've got
Oh,
awarded.
so we had the $3 million from the state for the Ped Bridge. $4 million, or was it $4 million for the Ped Bridge from the state lottery? We have $3 million that actually got in just in time before all this for Ice Age Drive. We have the 9.2 that the mayor for broadband. We have a little over $1 million for broadband. We have the $5 million for the EPA grant for the Public Works, the tan recite cleanup. And then we had 45,000 for van for the police department.
Left out the new one, the loan.
The big loans for the.
Oh, yeah, and then we have through the state, we have a $5 million loan through ODOT and a $12 million loan through Business Oregon Public Works Fund for Ice Age Drive.
Ice Age Drive.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
No, that's
It was
okay.
off the top
It
of
was
my-
really good news because,
Yeah.
that was a little bit questionable, 9 months ago. So we got funding for that. So
Yeah, so I think that ODOT will be bidding Ice Age Drive. I think is that sometime in March, right?
Yeah,
think
it's
it's one-
actually out to bid right now.
Oh, it's out to bid. Oh, it
Closes
closes.
the 20th.
That's right. So.
We seen any variance in home building? Tariffs and expensive materials, are we still,
we were just talking that I'm glad they bought the steel ahead of time for the bridge.
Yeah, I was talking to you right before, I'm glad we got that in before all those tariffs hit.
see if they last.
It's there's a lot of talk right now. I don't think we've actually seen actual impact yet. So,
Yeah.
We'll see.
News sad. It's coming.
And Eric, the community develop, Eric Cover, or not Eric Coverly, Eric put together a report. He's community development director. Our housing numbers, the homes being built were up compared to last calendar year. So we've seen positive news there. Can't tell you what the future is going to be predict, but yeah.
David, in May, when you bring the budget to us, it is already a balanced budget and senior leadership has gone through and made the cuts they need to get to that balanced budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
Would it be possible for each department to still like list maybe top 3 things that they didn't get into the budget that they wanted to so that we can see
Great idea.
what those items are?
Yeah, we used to do that.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Y'all gotta be strong, strong. Focused.
Well, Tim, are you still feeling like when you go to meetings, you're still a mayor that is financially looking good?
Oh, we are
Oh, yeah.
so far ahead of everybody
Yeah,
else.
Okay.
We're starting in the black, worried about dipping into the red. We've got cities and counties
Yeah.
that are deep in the red. I mean, did you see the announcement from Multnomah County on Friday? Their $20 million deficit in supportive housing services is now 104. It's really 134. They're
Yeah.
kind of being cagey. Yeah, 100 million, by the way, 104 million. So we are in great shape. I don't know, but thanks for mentioning that because we are in really good shape. Yeah.
Fired in Multnomah County.
So I like the idea of Dan of showing the things that didn't get in the budget. I only caution because in the past when that's happened, we had a very long debate going on about the budget committee telling the city manager what he should be doing with his budget. Well, we think this position should be funded fully enough, but that is not our role. City manager puts a budget in front of us after he's looked at it and determined. And so if we see we didn't fund this position or this, but it's just nice to know, but
Yeah.
that's.
The council sets policy goals. They budget
Exactly.
to those policy goals. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's a
just
good
remember that
reminder.
One budget year that was.
That was before you, David.
The Hunger Games or something?
It was.
Yeah.
There was some conversations happening in this room that shouldn't have happened.
I have a question about that then. So this committee then is just the signature, like we don't have,
We could, but the committee could decide to defund something, right? And then Craig would have to respond to that.
okay,
But what we shouldn't be doing is saying, this is Craig, this is how you're gonna staff that change.
We give him a
I-
$400,000 budget.
Yeah.
He gets to choose how to spend that. If we want to reduce it to 300, he needs to figure out where those cuts come from.
sure.
We
Okay.
determined that it's fair and balanced,
Yeah.
not how to balance it
Okay.
or what to fund.
Yes.
Yeah, and we build all of our budgets, as everyone knows in here, based off of the council goal setting session. We try to build all of the budgets around that.
Right.
Some services, we might be more support services, but we're still building our budgets around what council's determined as the priorities.
And then frankly, this committee could decide to not fund one of those priorities.
Yep.
Yeah. Theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had like an hour-long conversation on one position going from 0.5 to 0.75 and that whole, and really, I mean, that was in the discretion of the city manager anyways, just the dollar amount. So it really was a waste of time in our budget.
I've heard about those stories.
Yeah.
No, we haven't.
It's been
It's-
great the last few
yeah.
years. Yeah.
Even if we do the aspirational, what would you want? Yeah.
It is
It's
nice
more
to
just
know
like
like
feel
what our
better.
budget isn't able to sustain that we
Yeah.
need. I mean, that's
Yeah.
definitely something that's good to see.
Yeah, I'm sure other departments would like more staffing and that's good for the public to know that, hey, we're still not at full capacity or whatever. But yeah, it's not for us to say, where the funding should go.
But, it's the senior leadership level, and this is something that Craig implemented. you know, we do a kind of a collaborative budgeting process that you folks don't see where we're all sitting in a room if we all have to make cuts. Like last year, there's some cuts departments had to make and we kind of went around and each department cut a little bit here and there. Yeah, give and take and understanding that we can't fund everything, but you know, we work well together, try to do the best we can.
You know, it's, yeah, kudos to the whole team for that, because in the past, everyone was making decisions in silos. Everybody kind of does it together, which is great, because you understand the plight of the other departments.
No, this is a great experience and I'm not talking about any other place I've worked, but you could see where and when you work in silos, it could cause a lot of tension between departments and fighting for dollars and
Sure.
you
Because you
don't,
don't understand the needs of somebody else if you're not.
you just focused on your own department. Yeah. So no, it's a great budgeting process here at the city. And I'm welcome to take any feedback on the presentation materials. I'll take the one that the mayor brought up about kind of showing those charges for services. Just, I know we understand it here in this room, but someone out in the public might not understand that. So
Better.
Yeah.
Was great.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it might help when you say, you know, we do a transfer to, and verbally you say, transfer this to blank. Might even just add a column to say what fund they got transferred to, so you'd see it, you know, on the red on one and on green on the other. I don't know if that would help or not.
I could actually say transfer out to say street capital
Yeah.
or transfer in from community investment fund or something. Yeah, I'll be more specific there.
That way you can, you know, because in my mind, I'm looking at, okay, how are we tracking on revenue generation, like charges, when it's taken out ahead of time, then you can't. You
Yeah.
can't see that.
Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
Aren't we gonna do, oh,
All right. Well, if no more questions, I will adjourn this meeting. Are we ready to roll into the URA?
Well, yeah, we can just roll right in.
All right, go for it. I will now call to order the City of Sherwood Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting for February 27th, 2025. David, will you please conduct roll call?
Chair Strode.
Here.
Vice Chair Painter is absent. Brian Fairbanks is absent. Thomas Sherwood.
Here.
Nancy Taylor.
Here.
Tim Rosner.
Here.
Kim Young. Renee Browse is absent. Taylor Giles. Keith Mays.
Here.
Doug Scott is absent. Dan Stankey.
Here.
are you making a note that Matt's?
Be a visitor.
I'm not here.
But you are here.
I'm unofficially here.
What's your favorite?
Chime in on some comment.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, the next item is approving Budget Committee minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the URA Budget Committee minutes for December 5th, 2024?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion passed. So tonight's meeting will be a working session only, and there will be no general public comment at this meeting. And now we will move on to new business. I will turn it over to URA Manager Craig Sheldon.
It just, the only thing I have on this budget is, we have four big projects out of this, funding it in the capital side, where maybe the numbers are down right now, but we're going to be actually spending a lot of money here in the next 4 years. And I can talk a little bit further about that when we get to that point in this presentation. One thing that this budget is doing is we're bringing in more revenue than what we thought we were going to. So
Yeah.
David will probably talk a little bit about that. So,
Good problem.
I know.
so I'll turn it over to David.
All right, so the first fund, there's two funds in the 2021 URA, and that is the Operations Fund. And as the agency manager just stated, we're at 123% collections on budgeted property taxes. I did bring a supplemental budget in front of the URA board, increasing that amount, thus transferring it over to the capital side to pay for the capital projects. But as I talked about at the last meeting, we saw assessed value growth of a little over 50%. And as everyone said, that's not a bad problem to have coming from a finance director. So
So 300,000 over just in the first half.
yeah. And I believe, I'd have to go back. I believe we're gonna be around 1.8 million in collections. Way ahead of the original plan, the schedule. You know, I think we anticipated about 12 to 14% growth in those first 5 years. And you look at this 1 year, we saw a little over 50%. And there's still some properties not coming online, even, they might not come on the. Yep. So there's some properties, some big properties that will be coming online here in the next few years to help pay for some of these wonderful capital projects that we're seeing occur.
At some point, if we finish up the fiber to home project, we can start looking at a realignment.
Yeah.
URA.
Boundary change.
Boundary change.
Yeah. So as I said, property taxes are coming in well ahead of the adopted budget, and that is scheduled in our URA plan. Salaries and expenditures, I did move over, a former employee was coding all their time, the city managers, but I did make that journal entry. Materials and services, really just project driven. There's some work in there on Dulkey Lane through Business Oregon. Debt service payments, right at 50%. We pay half of it in December, half of it again in June. So everything is looking great in the operations side. And as I said, the supplemental budget figures are not included because that occurred after December 31st. But the next update, you'll see that. As for the capital side, that very first line, as the agency manager, Craig Sheldon was saying, that $4 million is the state lottery money for the bridge. So far, we've been reimbursed almost $3.6 million of that, which is great because I have not had to take advantage of the water fund loan yet because we still have enough funds in our LGIP account to continue to pay the bills. But once, as Craig was saying, though, we are going to be spending a lot of money here soon. You know, once that bridge, the span, I think one of the spans is going next week. Yeah. And then the other one is being built up there, almost completed up there by the Elks Lodge. And so you're going to see a lot of,
I don't go there very, up there very often.
So is that the state, when they give you a grant of 4 million, is it on a reimbursement basis?
it's a reimbursement
They
basis.
just
So
Give you the 4 million?
no, so yeah, we're submitting it. And so now you're going to see to Ice Age Drive, now that we received the funding for that, we're going to be starting to recognize, you know, the $3 million in federal revenue as we spend through it.
Using the cheap money first.
Yes.
Smart.
Yep. Yep. I don't want to have any trying to save on those interest expenses for it. Yeah. Salaries and wages, like I said, this is all project driven. Projects are really starting to ramp up in the URA. And I know Craig will probably talk a little bit about the project through the project updates here, but projects are ramping up. Whether it's, you know, the bridge project, Ice Age Drive is going to be getting going here soon, even though that's all handled through ODOT. They hire contractors, but we're still going to have some city staff involved in those processes. To date, as of the end of December, we've spent a little over $7 million, mainly just on the bridge, but there's some other expenditures on some other projects, a little bit of tannery work over there for the Public Works building. So with the project update, I don't know, Craig, did you want to talk about this?
Just quickly on that. So the Ped Bridge is on schedule for September timeframe. So for substantial completion, the contractor will be out there for a couple months, probably doing the cleanup and finishing up maintenance stuff. So that's where we're at on that project. Ice Age Drive is out to bid right now. Should be closed on March 20th. So you probably see construction out there if everything goes right this summer with a completion, substantial completion, probably, I'm going to say January 27, December 26, somewhere right in there. About 18 months. And of course, that's where we're getting funding for 3 million now that we got the loan. So it'll be over to construction season on that. And then the tannery side, this is one that's kind of in the air with the EPA grant. It could change some stuff, but it's already under way, and we're looking at 10/31 of 28. We have 4 years to do it, but if we have run into problems with funding and everything, it'll just get pushed out. So we're So that's where we're at on that. You're gonna spend we're gonna have a lot of money going out, in the local seeds on Ice Age Drive once it starts, so. Yeah, that's where those projects.
But then Ice Age Drive will generate
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
revenue.
Oh, yeah.
That's,
Yep.
that's one of the big keys, get that road built, unlock that potential of that area.
Yeah, well, pay
Yep.
that- pay that note.
So it's,
You're listening audience.
and luckily at the federal level, you know, as
What happens in the community? Yeah. Get dirt shovel ready.
Yeah.
There's more certainty for the development. community to turn around and stuff up.
They're holding to those dates I put out there, you're right.
Although you should probably explain what's substantially.
So substantial people can actually use the facility, but they'll still be working. That's really where it is.
almost like the punch list, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
Or he's doing great.
You are doing fantastic. And even when we received that update from that consulting firm, he had nothing but positive things to speak about how well this URA is not typical URA to perform the way this one is performing. So
Great job. Good meeting.
All right, if there are no questions, I adjourn this meeting.
thank you, everyone.